Have you ever wondered how a Canon R6 compares to a Leica SL? In today's video I got the chance to test drive a Canon EOS R6 against my Leica SL camera. I shoot both cameras side by side during one of my model workshops, and I'll share the results and my first impressions of whether or not I need to get a Canon R6. Hi guys, Matt here from MrLeica.com. So if you saw my video Fuji versus Leica, when a Fuji shooter came to one of my Leica workshops, I let him test my Leica SL, and by the end of that workshop he wanted to buy a Leica SL. Will the same be true in today's video? Maybe, maybe not. Today's photographer already owned Leica cameras, both film and digital, but he still wanted to try my Leica SL because he didn't own the SL, and he just happened to have his R6 with him, so I took the opportunity to try the R6. So to give you some background, I'm a portrait and wedding photographer from the UK, but I run model photography and Leica workshops both in London and also overseas, such as in Poland. And both me and the German photographer met in Gdansk, and I did a one-day workshop with two models. So Alex, the photographer, brought with him his Leica M10, various other Leica film cameras and non-Leica film cameras, and also his Canon R6. Alex asked me to bring my Leica SL and also my Voigtlander 50 f2 Apo lens. As part of my service, I bring things for other people to try during the workshops. So what were my first impressions of the Canon R6? I have seen these cameras being used before during weddings, but I've never really taken much notice. First impressions, the camera bodies are really light and pretty small. They're lighter and smaller than a Leica SL camera, but some of the lenses are absolutely humongous, bigger than SL lenses. The lenses I'm talking about, on this occasion I was using the 50 1.2 Canon lens. There's also the 85 1.2 Canon lens, which is also big. And then I've seen wedding photographers using the 24 to 70 f2 monster lens. So with the lens attached, the Canon setup is bigger than the Leica setup. However, if you look at body alone, the Canon body is really small and compact. What about using the camera itself? When I bring the camera up to my eye, I imagine it's like flying an F-15 fighter jet. It feels like you've got some ultra-modern goggles equivalent in front of your face with all these electronic gizmos and things telling you millions of different bits of information. And then the Canon R6 has got eye detection, so you half press the shutter and you've got like near instant autofocus, and it just, everything's just so quick. It makes like a SL look like a bit of a prehistoric digital camera from like 10 years earlier. I mean, it is old, but there's a startling difference in terms of how modern the Canon R6 is when you look through the viewfinder. I was a little bit disappointed that it hadn't washed the dishes when I'd finished the photos. It seemed to do everything else. The big question is, how do the images compare to the Leica SL images? On the SL, I didn't have any Leica lenses with me, so I shot some photos with the Voigtlander 50 f2 Apo, and I shot some lenses with the autofocus Sigma 65 f2. I shot both cameras in RAW mode, and these photos are unedited. First impressions from the colours from the Canon are very Canon-like, very yellowy orange, like I remember from 10 plus years ago when I used to shoot Nikon and all the other wedding photographers shot Canon. And I think the same is true today. They still have that almost overly yellowy orange tone across the whole image. If you look at the greens in the bottom corner here, the greens shot with the Leica on the left look green, and the leaves shot with the Canon look like a yellowy green. If you're looking at raw files only, I don't really like the Canon colours, if I'm honest, but here's a few more images for comparison. On the left you've got the Leica SL colours or Leica SL photos, and on the right you've got the Canon R6. What about if you apply one of my Mr. Leica presets? I applied my Lumix G pack just to give like a middle ground between not a Leica preset pack and not a Canon preset pack. And once you apply the preset, there's not a huge difference between the Leica images and the Canon images. I think the Leica photos are slightly sharper if you pixel peep, and this is with the 50 f2 Apo or the Sigma, both at f2, versus the Canon 1.2 shot at f2. Other than that, you can pretty much fake a Leica look just by adding a preset with a Canon camera. But what about colours? Can you actually get nice colours from a Canon camera? So for this, I tried various preset packs to try and get some decent colours from the files with my existing presets. If you're a Canon user, my Leica SL presets are not great in terms of colours with a Canon sensor. However, the Lumix G pack my third color preset, which I'm going to start adding to the pack because it works for Leica cameras more than Lumix cameras. That works really well with the Canon R6 files. So these photos are now Canon R6 plus Lumix G color preset applied. And I think they're actually quite nice. I don't really dislike them, and they are acceptable colors to me. So yes, maybe you can get acceptable colors if you tweak the photos in post. Obviously, you don't need to use my Mr. Leica Lightroom presets. You can make your own, but if you do want my presets, you can find them in the first link in the description below. Okay, what about camera specs? How do they compare? What's the pros of the Canon versus the pros of the Leica? They both have some strengths and weaknesses. If you take the Canon first, pro number one, smaller and lighter, which means if you're shooting weddings and you're carrying cameras around all day, smaller, lighter cameras are nice to have. Number two, the extremely fast autofocus. That's amazing for, as I say, event photography. You've got eye detect, and you've also got, I think, 6,000 plus focus points compared to only 49 focus points on the SL. So if you love autofocus, you're probably going to like the R6 better than the SL. Number three, if you love flip screens, again for event photography, if you want to get low, high, all the usual tricks of having a flip screen, the R6 gives you a flip screen, the Leicas don't give you a flip screen. And lastly, number four, Canon cameras are cheaper than Leica cameras. Stay with me until the end and I'll give you the actual prices. And then what about the pros of the Leica SL? Number one, the viewfinder. The older Leica SL still has a way better viewfinder, both in terms of resolution and magnification. And then if you get the even more recent Leica SL2S or Leica SL2, those viewfinders are even better than the SL. And say, for example, you love manual focusing, vintage lenses like myself, the SL is going to win every day because you've got the crystal clear view of whatever you're photographing when you're doing manual focus. Of course, if you're doing everything on autofocus, it doesn't really matter if you've got a low resolution viewfinder. Number two for the Leica, the colours. Colours are more true to life from the Leica, and I think Leicas are generally fairly famous for having nice colours, and this is no exception from this test. That said, you can edit the photos from the Canon to get pretty nice results, so it's not really a game changer if you don't mind editing your photos with presets. Number three for me, probably more of a personal one. I quite enjoy having a top plate LCD display for chimping my settings rather than having to look on the main LCD. The SL has a top LCD, the R6 doesn't. And pro number four, it doesn't really matter who you ask. I think most people would agree that holding a Leica camera is a nicer experience than holding any other brand camera, whatever you want to call that. The Leica-ness, it just feels more premium, but I'm used to Leica cameras, so blah blah blah. You know what I'm trying to say. Okay, then what about the prices? So you can buy a brand new Canon R6 for around £2,400, check Amazon, or $2,500, maybe again Amazon or B&H. You can't actually buy the Leica SL camera anymore, but I can put links to eBay below to see if you can find some good deals. You can get an SL for less than £2,000, and if you want the new equivalent, you'd need to get the Leica SL2S, which costs £4,200 or around $5,300. So final verdict, was I impressed with the Canon R6? I was so impressed with the autofocus. I can totally see why wedding photographers use it. It's just like auto everything, you can't really go wrong. I think the Canon R6 makes the perfect workhorse camera, and you can see why it's so popular both for photo and for video. A massive thanks to Alex for letting me test his R6. Here he is with some of his cameras. He enjoyed the workshop so much, we've booked it again for October. And finally, did Alex like the SL camera? Yes, so much so that he sold his Leica M10 after finishing the workshop and bought a Leica SL. So if you're an M10 shooter and you've never tried a SL series camera, if you love portraits, I would definitely recommend test driving them. They are pretty amazing. I love my SL, and I've got M cameras, CL and Q, and I still use the SL for all the portrait stuff. If you enjoyed this video, please smash the like button. If you want to join one of my workshops, I can put some links below. If you're a Canon shooter, let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree with my findings. And as always, a massive thanks to my patrons. If you missed the video of the Fuji versus SL, I can link that here.